All right, so we're diving into Exodus today. Chapters 2 through 39, specifically. We're going deep on this one, folks. What makes this story tick after all these years? What makes it so timeless? You wanted more Exodus, and we're delivering, unpacking some of those big themes.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, think about it. History and law and spirituality all woven together. That's Exodus. And it's resonated with people for, what, centuries?
Thousands of years, and we're still talking about it. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Moses, abandoned as a baby.
In a basket.
On the Nile River.
Talk about an entrance.
Mm-hmm.
But, the Nile, that wasn't just any river, was it?
Good point. No, it wasn't.
Right. I mean, the ancient Egyptians, they worshiped the Nile. Like a god. Happy, they called him.
The source of everything.
Fertility, abundance, the whole deal.
Okay, so Moses gets pulled from these, sacred waters.
You can't make this stuff up. It's almost like, foreshadowing.
His destiny.
Right. He comes from this divine river.
And it ends up,
changing Egypt forever.
Yeah. And then he gets rescued by Pharaoh's daughter.
Oh, the irony.
Talk about a twist. The very person he's supposed to escape from ends up raising him.
It really makes you think. The social dynamics, right?
Yeah.
A Hebrew baby raised as Egyptian royalty. That's got to shape a worldview or two.
No kidding. Okay, fast forward. Moses is an adult now.
Out in the desert.
And boom, God speaks to him.
Through a burning bush.
Vivid imagery, right? But what's the real message there?
Well, it's a powerful symbol. Divine presence showing up in the ordinary. I mean, the bush is burning, but not consumed. It's God's power, God's holiness.
Yeah.
Transforming, not destroying. It's a pretty amazing concept.
Yeah. And then God gives Moses this crazy task. Free the Israelites. Lead them to a land flowing with milk and honey. That's the promised land, right? Powerful motivator.
Absolutely. Hope, freedom. It kept them going, through all that hardships. Like, even when things are dark, there's always a promise of something better.
But Moses wasn't exactly thrilled, was he?
Not at first.
I mean, who am I? What if they don't believe me? Relatable, right? We've all been there.
Oh, yeah. Total human moment. But then God reassures them, gives them signs, and then the big reveal.
I am...
Whoa! That's a name that stops you in your tracks.
It's a statement.
God's eternal, self-sufficient, I-S. Powerful stuff. It's a concept that's had philosophers scratching their heads for centuries, right?
It's right there in the text. Okay, so, armed with this, divine mandate, Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh.
And how'd that go?
Not great. I mean, Pharaoh's like, who is this Lord guy anyway?
Talk about a power struggle. The God of Israel versus the might of Egypt. It's a classic showdown.
And then the plagues hit. I always thought those were, just random chaos. But you're saying there's more to it? That they were symbolic, too.
Oh, yeah, think about it. Each plague targeted something specific. Like the Nile turning to blood. That's Hapi, the Nile god right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then frogs. That's Heket, the frog-headed goddess.
Whoa, I never thought about it that way. So they weren't just plagues, they were like...
symbolic strikes. Right at the heart of their beliefs.
Mind blown. Can you imagine waking up to a river of blood?
And then there's the final plague.
The death of the firstborn.
Devastating. And symbolic, too.
Yeah, how so?
Osiris, a major god connected to the underworld and rebirth. This plague shook their entire belief system. Chaos, despair, the whole 9 yards.
It makes you wonder what was going through Pharaoh's head. I mean, his heart just kept getting harder every plague, more stubborn. What's the deal with that?
Good question. That hardened heart, it's a tricky one. Some scholars think God intervened directly. Others say, nah, it was all Pharaoh. Stubbornness, pride, refusing to acknowledge something bigger than himself. It's a fascinating debate. Free will versus divine intervention. Something to think about as you explore Exodus.
All right, so let's talk Passover, a tradition that's lasted thousands of years. Unblemished lamb, blood on the doorposts, the hurried meal. It's also specific. Why all the detail?
It's packed with meaning. The lamb, that's sacrifice. The blood, protection. And the meal, the urgency of their escape. It all points to something deeper. Like it foreshadows the ultimate sacrifice, right? Yes. The Lamb of God. It connects the past, present, and future.
And then the escape.
Through the Red Sea.
Talk about a visual, the water's parting. But it's more than just a cool story, right?
Liberation in its purest form. Rebirth. It's like from slavery to freedom. God overcoming any obstacle to save his people. It's a powerful image.
Absolutely. But getting out of Egypt, that was just the start. The wilderness, that was a whole other challenge. They were thirsty.
Hungry.
And let's be honest, complaining a lot.
Oh yeah, they definitely complained. But, it was a test. Their faith, their endurance, They had to learn to rely on God. Even after witnessing miracles, doubt creeps in. It's a human thing.
And God provided for them water from a rock and then manna from heaven.
Daily bread, appearing out of thin air. It shows God's faithfulness, his care. Even in the toughest times, he provides. It's a reminder to be grateful, to trust, even when we can't see where the next blessing is coming from.
So true. And speaking of challenges, the Israelites weren't exactly saints in the wilderness, but their struggles show us something important about faith. Even when we see miracles, we still doubt. It's a process.
The journey. The wilderness wasn't just about physical survival. It was about spiritual growth. Learning to trust God when things get rough.
Okay, so finally they reach Mount Sinai. This is where things get real. What makes this place so important?
Mount Sinai, it's a turning point. God descending on the mountain, thunder, lightning. That's the awe-inspiring power of the divine. This is where the covenant between God and Israel is sealed.
And at the heart of that covenant,
The Ten Commandments.
talk about a lasting impact.
The Ten Commandments, they weren't just rules. They became the foundation for, well, so much. Law, morality, Western civilization, still relevant today. Amazing, isn't it?
It really is. But it wasn't just the Ten Commandments, right? There were a ton of other laws, too.
Oh yeah, tons. All aspects of life. Social justice, how to treat the poor, foreigners, the Sabbath rituals, the whole deal. God cares about wholeness, justice, compassion. It shaped their entire society, not just their religion.
Wow. But even with all that guidance, they still messed up. The golden calf. Talk about pushing it.
The golden calf, that's a classic example of human nature, isn't it? Even after miracles, we stray. They wanted a tangible God, something they could see. Impatience, fear, who knows? But they were warned about idolatry.
Moses is up on the mountain getting the commandments, and they're down there building a golden calf. Can you imagine his face when he came back down?
Furious. And God was angry too. It shows how serious this was. Disobedience has consequences. It's a powerful lesson.
Even with forgiveness, our actions matter. So faith is a journey, ups and downs. Even with a covenant, there's free will and, well, mistakes.
Exactly. It's about learning and growing. And speaking of the covenant, it's interesting that right after the golden calf incident, we get the instructions for the tabernacle. The portable sanctuary where God would dwell among his people.
You know, I never connected those two things, but it makes sense. It's like, okay, let's reset back to what's important, a place to connect with God.
Right. And what's fascinating about the tabernacle is its symbolism. It's not just a building. It represents God's desire to be with his people.
And the craftsmanship involved, the Ark of the Covenant, the altar of incense, the priestly garments. It's like they were expressing their faith through their work. Amazing.
It shows how every skill, every talent can be used to honor God. Even ordinary work becomes an act of worship when it's done with devotion and intention.
Okay, we've covered a lot here. Moses, the plagues, the Exodus, the wilderness, Mount Sinai, the golden calf, the tabernacle.
And we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to unpack.
That's what I love about deep dives. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Always something new to discover. But before we get ahead of ourselves.
Right. So what's standing out to you so far? What's resonating? What's grabbing your attention?
So much symbolism, right? It's like every little detail has a deeper meaning. Makes you think about God, humanity, and how they're connected.
It's almost like a guidebook for building a relationship with, well, the divine. Even if our, tabernacles look different today.
I like that. The principles are still there, though.
Yeah.
Intention, reverence, wanting to connect with something bigger than ourselves.
Right. And those instructions for building the tabernacle, so specific, no room for error, it seems like. God was serious about this thing. What really stands out to you in all those details?
Well, the craftsmanship, the detail. It's all so intentional. The ark, the altar of incense, the bronze altar, the priestly garments, they were creating a sacred space. It wasn't just throw it together. It was a meeting place between God and humanity. You know, you're right. And the ark held the tablets of the law, right? God's presence, his covenant. And then the incense altar, that's prayer, worship rising up to God. And even the clothes they wore, the priests, all symbolic. The colors, the materials, it was a complete experience.
Holistic, right. And remember, this is after the golden calf incident. So it's almost like a fresh start, a way to reconnect with God on his terms.
That's a cool way to look at it. So we've got the drama, the miracles, and in the end, the Israelites are ready to enter the promised land. It's like a reminder, isn't it? Even after escaping slavery, surviving the wilderness, the journey of faith, it goes on.
And we all have our own journeys, don't we? Our own Egypts, our own wilderness. But Exodus gives us hope. God's faithful. He provides. He can lead us through anything to a place of freedom of abundance.
It's not about being perfect. It's about sticking with it, seeking even when we mess up, trusting that God's there with us in the tough times, leading us towards freedom.
And sometimes that freedom means facing our own pharaohs, right? Those things that hold us back, inside or outside. What do you think those pharaohs might be for, someone listening?
Oh, that's a good one. Makes you think. Fear, maybe. Doubt. Limiting beliefs. Or pressure from others, our own past experiences. Anything that keeps us stuck, keeps us from being who we're meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Exodus, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
The themes, they're so relevant. Liberation, covenant, that idea of being God's chosen people. It's about searching for freedom, purpose, belonging, human stuff. Even after all these years, it still speaks to us.
It really does. And there's so much more to discover, beneath the surface. Keep digging, everyone. Find those hidden gems in Exodus. Let those timeless messages speak to you. What are some questions that you hope our listeners will, ponder as they keep exploring?
Well, we talked about the tabernacle, God's dwelling place, so carefully constructed. It's a physical representation of God's presence, right? So what does that tell us about how the Israelites view the divine? Is it different from how we think about God today? I don't know, just something to consider.
That's a great question. It challenges us to think about how our understanding of God shapes our relationship with Him, and how our expressions of faith might be different from those who came before us.
And maybe think about this. Where do you see glimpses of the divine in your own life? What are your burning bushes? The things that call you to something more, to be more yourself? Where are those unexpected encounters that reveal something deeper about you and your connection to something bigger?
Those are powerful questions, and they deserve more than just a head-scratching response. They require heart-searching. Exodus isn't just an old book. It reflects our struggles, our hopes. It's a mirror.
It shows us that we're on a journey, constantly being shaped by those moments where we bump into, the divine, challenged to grow, to step into freedom, and to be a part of that ongoing story of liberation, of covenant.
So as we wrap up our Exodus deep dive, keep exploring. Let its stories inspire you. Let its wisdom guide you. And let those messages of hope and redemption light a fire in you.
Find your promised land, your own freedom, your own abundance. And let the lessons of Exodus be your companion along the way. It makes you think about, those places where we connect with God. It could be a physical place or just, a feeling, a state of mind. Our modern day tabernacles. How do we make those spaces sacred?
That's interesting. Where do you feel that connection? What does it look like for you?
For me, sometimes it's just a quiet corner in my house, where I can pray or meditate. Or being out in nature, feeling that sense of awe.
Yeah, or even just being with people.
Yeah.
Sense of community, shared purpose. Those moments can be really powerful.
It's like God isn't limited to a building or a ritual. He's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
We just have to be open to it. Remember that burning bush in the middle of nowhere?
Right. And speaking of journeys, the Israelites' journey wasn't always pretty. They doubted, they disobeyed, they messed up a lot. But God stuck with them, patiently guiding them toward the promised land.
It's a good reminder for us. It's not about being perfect. It's about keeping going. Even when we stumble, trusting that God's there, meeting us in the mess, helping us find our way to freedom.
And sometimes freedom means facing those things that hold us back, our own personal pharaohs. We've talked about this, but what are some of those red seas we need to cross, those obstacles that seem impossible to overcome?
That's a tough one. I think for me, it's often about fear, overcoming a fear that's been holding me back. Or maybe it's a relationship that's not healthy, or a job that just sucks the life out of you. Sometimes it's just letting go of the past. That can be a Red Sea in itself.
Yeah, that's huge. But the important thing is you don't have to do it alone. God was with the Israelites, and He's with us too, every step of the way, offering guidance, strength, whatever we need.
That's really comforting. So as we finish up our deep dive into Exodus, what do you hope people will remember from all of this?
I hope they see that Exodus isn't just an ancient story. It's a living story. It speaks to us, about our own experiences, our own struggles. It's about freedom, about belonging, about figuring out who we are in God's eyes.
And I hope it inspires people to keep exploring, to keep digging into these old texts, and to find those truths that are still relevant today, truths that can change our lives. So to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. May you find your own promised land, your own place of freedom and joy and all those good things. And may the lessons of Exodus be your guide along the way.